Good evening. My name is Bob Liff, and this is the CUNY Forum, a monthly town meeting that brings prominent New Yorkers together with the faculty and students of the Edward T. Rogowsky Internship Program in Government and Public Affairs. Don't tax me, don't tax thee, tax that man behind the tree. Well, in the time of Occupy Wall Street, which if nothing else has focused attention on income inequality, the man or woman behind the tree is a millionaire or a billionaire in the crosshairs of many Americans looking for a way to raise revenues to steady a foundering economy. In New York, that millionaire might actually be making as little as $200,000 a year or $300,000 a year in family income under a state income tax surcharge that Democratic Governor Andrew Cuomo insists he will not extend. Mayor Bloomberg, for whom $1 million is half a week's income, resists adding a city income tax surcharge on the wealthiest New Yorkers, as well as a living wage bill proponents say could help offset some of that inequality. The mayor defends the right to protest, even as his police kicked the protesters out of Zuccotti Park, and he complains they are scapegoating wealthy bankers and their rich compatriots. To invert the gospel according to St. Matthew, the rich, we will always have them with us. Inequality is in fact stark. A recent Congressional Budget Office study found the top 1% of earners more than doubled their share of the nation's after-tax income over the last 3 decades, taking home 17% compared to 5% for the lowest 20% of earners. The CBO said that was in part due to a tax system that has become less progressive, shifting the burden away from income and onto payrolls in the form of higher but capped Social Security taxes. And New York City had the nation's greatest income disparity. This disparity comes against the backdrop of increasingly polarized and dysfunctional politics. Republicans who are, depending on your point of view, fueled by or captured by a Tea Party-driven right wing, block attempts by Democrats to soften its impact, most recently in opposing President Obama's jobs bill, including elements that mainstream Republicans supported not that long ago. The recent Ohio vote overturned a bill eviscerating unionized public employees' rights, seems to signal that voters are having second thoughts about last year's election that sent a radically conservative bunch to Washington and some state capitals, though not, it should be said, to Albany or City Hall. The same polls that show a majority of Americans identify with the disillusionment that spawned Occupy Wall Street, and though both groups resent the comparison to the Tea Party before it, also show majority support for additional taxes as part of the solution, especially if those taxes are paid by the wealthiest among us. We are joined by 4 New Yorkers taking part in the debate over the Millionaires Tax, the living wage bill, inequality, and how to work our way through short-term disruptions and long-term possibilities in an economy gone awry. Mark Lieberman is an economist with economics analytics research and part of the CUNY TV family. Assemblywoman Vanessa Gibson is a Democrat from Bronx's 77th District, representing Claremont, Highbridge, Mount Eden, and Morris Heights. Robert George is an editorial writer for the New York Post, and Daniel Isaac is the chair of the New York Republican County Committee. Let me start with you, Bob, with Robert George. For the 647th time, the New York Post had a quote at the bottom of the editorial page today, which is read Andrew's lips. You are kidding yourself if you think you can be one of the highest tax states in the nation, have a reputation for being anti-business, and have a rosy economic future, something that the governor said on October 17th. Why do you put it there so many times?
Well, Bob, first of all, I wanted to thank you for that fair and balanced introduction.
That was pretty balanced.
We're on Fox News.
Yeah, absolutely. We put that in there because it's very, very clear that the governor has been getting a lot of pressure from all sides to go back on his pledge to not extend the Millionaires Tax, and we want to remind him on a daily basis what he said and hold his feet to the fire and basically hope he keeps his word, because the fact is New York has seen an outflux, really, of individuals of high wealth and so forth over the last couple of decades. And when those people leave, they take their taxable income, they take money that would be going into job creation and things like that, and that creates job problems within the state, particularly given the broader national economic problems. And so we think that the governor was good to point that out at the time, and we think we need to keep reminding him of that.
Mark, let me Do people flee because of, would people flee because of a so-called millionaire's tax, even if it's on people making a lot less than $1 million?
Well, we haven't seen that experience yet, really, in New York. People didn't run out of New York. Yes, it's true that the out-migration of New York was about 1.7 million in the last few years, in the last decade, I guess it was. But a lot of that was people, remember, New York has the lowest home ownership rate in the country, or among the lowest home ownership rates in the country. And it also has one of the highest unemployment rates. People go from state to state to get another job. If you have a house, that's an albatross around your neck, and you can't necessarily go from a 9% unemployment rate state like New York to a 4% unemployment rate like South Dakota. But we did also,
Who wants to go to South Dakota, by the way?
we actually did see there were some numbers on this. Maryland imposed a millionaire's tax, or the equivalent of a millionaire's tax. And it is true, the Maryland State Department of Taxation reported a huge number, a drop-off in the number of tax returns of people who were earning more than $1 million. But only 15% actually left the state. The others who filed tax returns that showed an income of less than $1 million after having shown it the year before, higher the year before, didn't make as much because of the recession. So we don't have the numbers behind us to show that when you impose the tax, people are going to run out.
Assemblywoman, the Speaker, and I would suspect a majority of the Democratic caucus in the state assembly would support extending that millionaire's tax.
Yes.
At the risk of going up against the governor. Why?
Absolutely. Well, it's a number of different things. New York State is one of the highest tax states in the nation, and we recognize that. But many of us who represent poor and low income and working family and immigrant communities, we recognize that so many New Yorkers are just struggling to survive. They're in need of jobs, they're in need of quality and affordable health care, and they want their children to go to good schools. The reality is that a lot of these public services and public programs that the state is supposed to commit itself to, we have rescinded on that commitment. Just this year in the budget that we passed April 1st, we cut $1.4 billion in education. We cut $2.6 billion in health care alone, and we cut a number of social service and other human service programs. And the reality is studies have shown, Siena College just did a recent study surveying all New Yorkers, and 70% of the New Yorkers that were polled do support an extension of the millionaire tax. Recognizing in the last decade we have lost almost 2 million residents, but the wealthiest New Yorkers are not leaving. They are still staying here. Why? Because New York is still one of the greatest states in the nation, and you still have access to so much. So contrary to what many have said, we do not see the large influx of wealthy New Yorkers who are leaving the state. And what the Assembly Democrats, led by our Speaker, what we attempted to do this year in our resolution was we wanted to make the millionaire tax, in fact, a millionaire tax. Right now, it only focuses on households of $200,000 for single, $300,000 for couples. We wanted to make it a true millionaire tax. And if we are successful, the millionaire tax for households of 1 million or more would bring the state of New York $4 billion next year. So we realize that of the total of the millionaire New Yorkers, many of them were under that million threshold. And that is why we attempted to just make it a true millionaire tax.
Willie Sutton said he robbed banks because that's where the money is. But you even see people like Warren Buffett, who's more than a millionaire, saying, I pay a lower tax rate than my secretary. And it seems as if Occupy Wall Street has kind of tapped into some sense that there is this inequality. What's happening?
Well, first of all, I think that that wasn't entirely accurate. I had seen a piece in the Wall Street Journal talking about Warren Buffett's claim to that effect, and quite frankly, most of his income is based upon capital gains and not a true income tax per se. But if you look at New York State as a whole, we are the most regulated, most taxed state in the nation. There was a recent survey by the George Mason University that found out New York State is the least free state in the entire United States.
You know who funds that? The Koch brothers fund the studies at George Mason. I mean,
Well, but it's still legitimate.
It's still a legitimate
Okay.
study.
Yes.
Doesn't matter, but it's still based upon the facts. And the facts are, and no one can dispute it, that we are the most regulated, most taxed state in the country. There is also no dispute that New York has lost more population over the past few decades than any other state, as evidenced by our decrease in congressional delegation. We're losing two congressional seats that are going to be districted out because of the loss of population. There was also a recent survey, not funded by the Koch brothers, when it talked about the young people, the next generation of New Yorkers who are going to fuel our economic engine. A large percentage of them, I don't recall exactly what it is offhand, but a large percentage of New Yorkers aged 30 and under are leaving the state. And why? Because they don't see a future here. They just, how many college graduates can't get a job, are living at home in their parents' basement or the room they grew up in because the jobs aren't here.
And where are they moving to? They're moving to many southern states where the taxes are lower, regulations are lower, and well, in the current recession, I wouldn't say the jobs are necessarily plentiful, but they seem to be a little bit more inviting, and there seems to be a little bit more diversity of them than there are in New York right now.
Florida's becoming a suburb of New York. How many New Yorkers
Atlanta's becoming
have moved?
a suburb
Well, one of the
New
things
York.
you forget about with Florida is, I mean, yeah, it is true.
Florida's always been a suburb of New York.
Yeah, we're not going to go there. But you forget about, you concentrate on the income tax, you concentrate on sales tax. Compare the real estate tax in Florida, real estate taxes in New York, even after the governor's cap on it. They're incredibly higher. Rush Limbaugh made a big thing about wanting to leave New York because he was so taxed, and he moved to Florida, and he's paying more in taxes than he was paying in New York.
I think one of the problems with New York also is we have a very dysfunctional state government here. As such, if I'm worse,
present company accepted.
Yes, present company accepted.
I think it's been exceeded by Washington. I mean, yeah, I think Washington has the state government. Okay.
But over the years, it's been shown we have a very dysfunctional legislature. I ran for the state assembly back in the mid-'90s when I was 30 as a young kid. And one of my great lines when I was going around campaigning was that the Soviet Politburo, during the height of communism, had a higher turnover rate than the New York State Legislature. I mean, either you leave the state legislature in handcuffs or you're carried out. And the fact is
and
that
hasn't changed.
No,
that
it has not. No, it was death, indictment, or you become a judge. I think those were the only those are the only three ways.
But the fact is, we are in a deep crisis in New York, and it's only going to get worse. We just saw last week the budget deficit is now projected to be $3 billion, and that's still based upon overly optimistic tax revenue projections because so much of our state economy is reliant upon Wall Street. Now, I'm not going to sit here and apologize for what's going on Wall Street. I think what went on there was outrageous in many instances, and a lot of people who should be in jail who aren't for what went on there. But at the end of the day, Wall Street is the economic engine that has traditionally driven New York. And until we can get back an industrial base, which we've not been able to do, and that's why upstate New York is in the horrendous economic condition it has been in for decades, it's only going to get worse here. And overtax is not going to do it.
Arithmetic before. How much did you say would be raised?
$4 billion.
And you said a $3 billion deficit?
And also, if you look at it, I mean, we talk about young people. We talk about the opportunities that we want our youngsters to have in getting access to a higher education, to quality, so that they can compete in a global economy in the 21st century. In this budget, we raised the tuition on CUNY and SUNY, and yet we cut SUNY and CUNY's budget by millions of dollars of operating dollars. So all I'm saying is that what is the direction that the state is going into? What are we saying to our young people if we want them to remain in New York, get an education, and be a part of our community, be a part of our society?
First of all, the education budget, the state education budget has gone up by 25 to 40% over the last over the last decade. The other thing is cuts that were made in the budget. The reason why there was a year-to-year cut was because there was a huge increase in 2009, 2010 because of the stimulus funds, and so the baseline that was there was a cut in that. So I mean, in terms of say where the state was like in terms of 2007, 2008, there has not been that much of a cut in state funds.
You're also looking at a huge increase in enrollment because those same kids, those like young adults, excuse me, who are going
kids
back
to
yeah,
kids to us.
Age is relative, right?
going back to or staying in school is clearly a function of the inability to get a job.
Right.
And it's an inability to get a job that pays a meaningful, or if you will, living wage. I can segue right into.
Oh, what a segue!
Wait a minute. Now, in fact, the living wage bill, on a philosophical basis, kind of raises the question of what the role of government is. Now, the living wage bill would, mainly apply to economic endeavors that are getting some level of public support. So if you you know, if the piper pays you, then maybe you have to pay the piper. We're not talking about business development that does not tap into the government. So if you're getting something from the government, is it that unreasonable? And even the Catholic Archdiocese yesterday, yesterday as of the day that we're sitting here taping this, essentially in somewhat indirect ways, but it's pretty direct for the Archdiocese, came out in support of a living wage bill. Is it the role of government to try to bridge that gap?
Yes, I do believe so. And the living wage, and this is a personal crusade of the Bronx, came out of a project last year, the Kingsbridge Armory. And the Bronx Borough President took a very strong stance in opposing it because of the fact that the development project and the developer came to the Bronx with the idea of creating this massive mall in 60,000 square foot of space without any comprehensive living wage component. And so from that, there's been a major advocacy,
and
a lot of leaders.
As a result, the development was not built.
And how many jobs were lost?
Correct. There were
2,000
2,200 jobs that were lost, 2,000 construction jobs and a number of other local retail jobs that were lost.
And as the Bronx Borough President Ruben Diaz said at the time, he said, "Well, the days when any job is better than a good job are over." That was in. He said that I think in actually 2009, November, December 2009. So no, the project wasn't made. No jobs were made. He then tried to interview other people, try and bring in other projects and so forth. And the Bronx, which has the highest unemployment of any county in the state, the Armory is still empty. And I'm sorry, I think that's irresponsible.
As long as you went
That's
back into
irresponsible.
history, let me go back into history.
2009 is history?
Well, yeah, it is.
Well, it
For
is
some of
history.
us it
Okay,
is.
fine.
This is a quote about a living wage bill, which is and according to the quote, the bill will strengthen the workforce by providing a competitive wage to employees. And that was from Michael Bloomberg in November 2002 when he signed the living wage bill. Now he talks about the living wage bill as being akin to communism.
And also remember that within the living
We're not here
wage
to
bill,
defend
there- no, no, no,
There are lots of things I could talk about.
He is now opposing a living wage bill. And yet,
Remember-
9 years ago,
he said that in his first term when he was only running for 2 terms.
Okay, there
right?
you go.
So remember, the living wage bill has had several different amendments. So there are caveats that carve out small businesses and others that may be fearful of losing jobs and having to lay off workers. What the living wage bill in the largest component says that if you are a business that receives more than $1 million in tax credits from the state of New York, then you are mandated to pay your workers $10 with benefits or $11.50 without benefits an hour. So what we have done is we've tried to address many of the labor-related questions as far as some of the jobs that would be impacted. For me, representing the Bronx, as you have said with the statistics, it is just unconscionable to say to someone that it is acceptable that you can make minimum wage and still be on government assistance and expect that family to be able to take care of themselves. We are saying that in the city of New York, there are thousands of companies that continue to build and develop our city, and we want that. We want our communities to be built with schools and libraries and other forms of business that bring in jobs. But how is it that so many get to benefit from the hard work and the labor workers don't even get an adequate wage? $10 an hour is still not an adequate wage, and yet we're struggling just to get that.
Okay, so why didn't you make it 25 or 50 or whatever?
But
I mean, it's just, I mean,
the
you
fact
can
that-
make it any number you want. The fact is, when you add costs to a specific project, those costs are going to be coming somewhere.
That flows right back into the economy.
But are you going to be able to maximize the number of workers you could hire at that? No, you can't. It's going to have to come.
But Robert, you're getting something for you're being asked to agree to
Absolutely.
something in exchange for significant taxpayer investment, not private investment, taxpayer investment in your development. Whether it's a tax credit is a tax investment. So I mean, if you pay the piper, then you have to pay something back.
And what you are giving back is you are maximizing the number the employment. You are maximizing it. If you can hire 50 50 workers at minimum wage, as opposed to only being able to hire 35 or 25. That's another 25 people that are working that would not be working at the higher wage.
And it's also a part of what is the role of government in our economy. I mean, we look what's going on in Europe, and many talk about the fact that the United States is headed down the same road. You know, Greece is never going to get out of their problems. They're putting Band-Aids on a gushing wound. Italy, Spain, Portugal. You know, there's a big crisis that's, they've been kicking the can down the road, much as like what just happened in Washington with this so-called super committee, which was designed to fail when it was first created and just to punt it over for a couple of years to the next elections. And so that's the bigger picture here, is what is the true role of government in terms of how it regulates an economy? And I think Keynesian economics has taken a big hit because that was the ideal in Europe. When President Obama talked about, when he said to Joe the plumber about spreading the wealth around, it hasn't worked well in Europe, and it's not going to work well here.
Except that the failure of the super committee, now maybe this is a partisan lens, the failure of the super committee is because the Republicans in the committee, they view any sense of adding of additional revenues as toxic.
And the Democrats
When you consider
toxic.
well,
cutting
no,
anything.
the Democrats have agreed to
or cutting entitlements.
the Republican presidential candidate said, were asked, would you agree to $10 in cuts in exchange for $1 in additional revenue? And across the board, they said no. I mean, can you? And remember, our tax rates are from 70% down to the mid-30s now in terms of the top rate. If you go back to if you
add in state and local,
Don't forget the sales tax you pay when you buy goods and services.
But is
above
revenue
and beyond?
Is revenue part of a solution? If revenue is not part of a solution, is there a solution?
I'm willing to say that if we want to have the debate in terms of revenue enhancements, if we want to talk about it at the federal level, I think that's a reasonable debate to have, to say whether income tax needs to increase on the federal level. I think so. But in the context of where we are at the states, where we are in a sense competing with other local states, as well as competing southern states and so forth, when New York, in terms of relative position, is already one of the highest taxed states in the country, I don't think we should be talking about raising taxes.
It's called cutting waste, cutting fraud and abuse. I mean, you talk about the school system. We've been throwing more and more money at it over the years, and yet you don't see the level of the students in terms of the graduation rates. How much waste and fraud and abuse goes on? We read the stories oftentimes in the New York Post about these school janitors that make hundreds of thousands of dollars a year, and these onerous union rules and requirements. That's why I find one of the great ironies, we have this concept of the charter schools, where you're able to achieve great results, primarily with minority children in minority neighborhoods, at a fraction of the cost of a traditional school, and yet the unions are fighting it tooth and nail because, like any other bureaucratic institution, their first primary goal is self-preservation. That's the first thing you learn in Poli-Sci 101. And I find it also ironic that you have the heads of these unions and the teachers' unions who are out there supporting the Occupy Wall Street, yet what they neglect to mention is that the people who run these unions, they're part of the 1%. Michael Mulgrew won't divulge how much money he makes a year, or the people who have the UC, District 37, they're making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in salaries and benefits. So I think the hypocrisy is ranked there. The bottom line is cut waste, cut fraud, cut abuse. Same thing with Medicaid. People estimate New York State spends $53 billion a year, by far the largest Medicaid program in the country, twice as much as California spends, with I think half the number of enrollees. Yeah. People estimate at a minimum,
more than the next two states combined.
At a minimum, though, 10% of the Medicaid expenditures in New York are due to fraud and abuse. And Governor Cuomo started investigating it.
That goes back into a basic function of healthcare economics. I mean, you'd have to unwind a lot of what we do. When's the last time you shopped around when your doctor told you to go to physical therapy or something?
I don't go to doctors.
You don't go to doctors. You never
sick
do
man,
that.
a very
The
sick
doctor
man.
says go here. The doctor says go here, and you go there.
I don't malpractice.
There are things you don't shop around for, and one of them is healthcare. And we have to unwind the basic way we
But we need
spend
to do it because
healthcare.
we can't afford to do it anymore.
And the fact of the matter is that, we spend so much in the state on healthcare and education, but we need to have a better system of accountability.
Absolutely.
As a state legislator, I was proud to be one of the 18 votes to vote against mayoral control, because time and time again, when we give the city of New York money, that money goes where? We don't know. I represent School District 9 in the West Bronx, and I can tell you that while I have charter schools educating some of my students, many of my public schools are failing, but they get thousands and thousands of dollars. Where is that money going?
And and before mayoral control, nobody knew where it was going anywhere except into the Tweed courthouse bureaucracy. I think there's a whole lot more.
110.
I think there's
it was
uh,
pre.
110,
It was 110.
Tweed after.
110 Livingston. Excuse me. Right.
Well before.
But the point is there is much more accountability with mayoral control than when you had the old board of education
As the
structure.
father of 2 children in public schools, I will tell you that there is much more centralized control. That the argument that there's some kind of school-based system, which is part of the theory of part of what the city has talked about. This is a kind of a sore point since I have 2 kids in public schools. That the level of cuts that have happened in the school that my older daughter, the high school that my older daughter, who has an IEP, who's in a special ed kid, that the cutbacks in services are tangible, and in what she is, in terms of her needs and what she is experiencing. So, mayoral control has not meant devolving authority down to the schools to the degree that was kind of.
Maybe it hasn't quite gotten there yet, but I mean, I think there's a whole lot more. It's a whole lot less centralized than it was. And principals, for example, have a whole lot more autonomy, which I think is a good thing.
Well, I think it's a very good thing, because I think that when you look for a school for your kid, the principal is everything. The principal runs a
That's
good
the
school.
tone.
That's what it's all about.
And also, let's be clear that extending the millionaire tax for another year is not a new tax. It's an existing tax. It is an extension of an existing tax. That is not a new tax.
Well,
that is not a new
it's
tax.
not. But if you set up a structure where a tax is allowed to sunset, and then you're saying, well, we're not going to sunset it. We're going to extend it. In terms of the poor economics of it, I think.
Would you argue that that's the same case on allowing the Bush tax cuts to sunset? Mm-hmm. Would allowing the Bush tax cuts to sunset amount to a tax increase?
I think for the individuals affected, certainly. But that's not just the Bush tax cuts on the wealthy. It's also the Bush tax cuts on the middle class as well. And if you
that's not what the president is talking about.
But you're talking about when you say
allowing the taxes above a certain level.
But if you're talking about going back to the tax levels of the 90s. In a sense, we're talking about,
which was quite a successful economic era.
Which was I'm not disputing that. But the fact is, it would still impact both the middle class and the wealthiest in terms of the total tax rates.
We keep hearing that if we lower the taxes, if we cut regulation, we will create jobs. And it may be so. I mean, we did cut taxes and we did cut regulations under Ronald Reagan. And how long did it take for job growth to occur? You went through the entire Bush one, and it took 5 years at least for the impact of those tax cuts and regulatory changes to turn around into job creation. We don't have.
That's not true.
Absolutely.
It went through from 83,
we didn't have job creation.
83 to 89.
And we didn't have job creation
90
in those years. We didn't have any. The significant job creation, I'm not saying we didn't have any. The significant job creation occurred during the 8 years of Bill Clinton.
Don't forget where it was coming from, though,
but
with
those,
the huge inflation and everything
This audience can't wait 5 years for jobs to come back. And what the president is proposing is Jobs Act,
the biggest growth,
not all of which is perfect. He's talked about programs that will create jobs quickly.
I mean, like
and
the
that's
shovel-ready
exactly-
jobs that weren't so shovel-ready?
During the stimulus, right.
Let's talk about some poor phrasing.
But the
that's a
fastest
different topic.
growing, the fastest growing.
There is a lot of shoveling going on.
Yeah, okay. You're not going to get a disagreement from
The
me.
fastest growing component of the federal budget during the Reagan years and during the Bush years was, in fact, the deficit.
That's
The deficit?
Yes.
no.
During Bush 2 is what-
During Bush 2.
Well, I was talking about Bush
during
1.
2, yes.
I was talking-
But even under Reagan, when there is this,
And that's certainly true, and that was certainly true for the first term of the Obama administration as well.
Well, but the Obama administration, did you play the cards you're dealt? They were dealt cards that had the country in a dumper.
We had a tax cut that wasn't paid for under Bush 2.
We had
We had
wars
wars
that
that
were
weren't
taken
paid
off
for
budget.
under Bush 2.
Well, no, I'm-
so I mean, and
look,
what
I'm certainly
Obama
not gonna-
did, yeah, is it
certainly not
true
gonna
that
defend
Obama increased the deficit with a stimulus program? Yeah.
Yeah,
but
Bush
that
came
was
under criticism by Republicans for spending too much money. I mean,
And
that
where
was,
were they
that
in
was one
Congress?
large- well,
where were they?
Well, where
in
are
Congress?
they?
Well, actually, there was a
That's-
big,
and
there
that's
was,
why
there was
they
a
lost.
very, if you remember, there was a very big fight over the expansion of Medicare under
And the
under
prescription
Bush.
drug
Right,
program.
the prescription drugs.
drug program. So,
Which another unfunded
no,
expense.
look,
We're
you're
both
preaching-
agreeing-
You're preaching to the choir on that
Okay,
one. And
all right.
I'm not disagreeing there.
So when you look at Occupy Wall Street, which is, they may not be occupying Wall Street quite as much because they've been kicked out, but it seems to me that they've set off and both the Tea Party and Occupy Wall Street grow out of a sense that something is rotten in Denmark, and that in the case of
Denmark's
Occupy,
doing all right.
There's something right in the rest
something
of
is
Europe.
rotten in
Rotten in the
Greece.
rest of Europe. Yeah.
right?
And now Italy and Spain and Portugal and Ireland
The pigs.
and France.
They call
even
them the
now.
pigs,
Right,
right.
pigs.
which is kind of rude, I think.
Yeah, so do I. Yeah.
Why do you think? With all due respect to your newspaper, which is kind of turned the Occupy Wall Street into a cartoon, I think there's something genuine that's driven it,
Well-
and I do think that there's an analogy to what happened with the Tea Party, even though both groups resent the comparison.
Well, I mean, I think. We didn't necessarily have to turn them into a caricature.
have their own.
Yeah. I mean, there were incidents of incidents of sexual assault, and we won't have to get into the idea of how disgusting things were because they didn't have porta potties and all this other kind of stuff.
The loss of local jobs,
yeah,
the businesses that were affected.
Exactly. I mean, we did our job.
I don't mean to pick on the Post.
No,
picking on the Post is a great, is a great sport.
Hey, that's the way.
But
that's the way it
I
goes.
spent
No,
a lot of years picking on the papers I wrote for.
We
so.
did our thank you. We did our job in terms of reporting what was going on.
But
Now, I think there
what
was a-
has motivated it?
Well, I think there are definite legitimate concerns that the Occupy Wall Street folks have, and in fact, some of them there's some of the ones that the Tea Party also highlighted as well, like bank bailouts, for example. I think, though, that where they sort of made a tactical error. I mean, the Tea Party people. I mean, they did like a march. They did a couple of marches on Washington. They went to town halls that members of Congress were holding, and basically, kind of
Raised hell.
raised hell at them. They, in a sense, they got active. Whereas the Occupy crowd, it seems more, they seem to be focusing at making it as like a sit-in and trying to attract attention that way. I don't necessarily think
tactically is one thing. I'm talking about what it means in terms of is there an awakening politically
There's
as there was
frustration.
with the Tea Party and the frustration.
I think both sides, from the extreme of either ideological spectrum, are expressing the same thing: a dissatisfaction with the present political system.
And I would argue
fairness,
that it was
with
a
the
success.
fairness of the
It was a
present
success across the country, and it led
The Tea Party as well as
Occupy Wall Street, certainly, and I would argue
credit where
too
credit is
that it led to a success out of the super committee.
Well-
in that the super committee came back to Congress with a blank piece of paper and said, "You do your job. We're not doing it."
do you know-
Because
Are you basically saying that the super committee couldn't have not done that without the Occupy Wall Street people?
Do you know?
I think Occupy Wall Street helped.
Do you know
And
that-
almost gave the super.
Well, basically giving the Democrats a reason not to make a deal as much as the Republicans didn't want to make a deal.
Just one quick point on the super committee. We have some questions here. Despite the urgency of this situation, do you know how many times the super committee met this
Yeah,
November?
but it wasn't urgent.
Zero.
There was no need. There is no need
So
today
it was a
to
political act. It was a
to
politi-
eliminate the
it was a
deficit.
political smoke
the
and
need
mirrors.
is
I
to
think
get
it's shocking
jobs
that
for
you
everybody
think
sitting
that,
out here.
I think it's shocking that you think that people in Congress are acting politically. I think that's really a shocking
Captain Renault.
suggestion.
No craven.
Let me tell us your name and your campus.
My name is Nagis Khan. I'm from LaGuardia Community College. Assembly Member Gibson, how would you describe the Wall Street Occupy movements?
I would describe the Occupy Wall Street movement as a movement that's really cultivating and bringing out the frustration of New Yorkers. The fact that so many people call themselves the 99% because they're young people, they're students, they're unemployed, they're educated, and they're New Yorkers that have been in our city for so long, and yet they get so little. I think it's a movement that started, maybe with a group of people as an idea to just decide to occupy a location and not leave. Because not just of a frustration of Wall Street, because I know personally on one level, I'm frustrated with many parts of government, of the corporate greed that I have to deal with, and so many of the different challenges that I face as a young legislator trying to learn so much, but yet make decisions that have a long-term impact. So I think all of that is combined, and the continuing movement is growing, and it's growing throughout our boroughs, and people are starting to believe that, yes, this movement can make a difference. People are starting to listen to us, and maybe they will start to make decisions that are different. Maybe they will start to realize that, yes, the 99% does have a voice. They can rise and stand together with one purpose, and they can make a difference.
It seems to me that the closest, the Occupy Wall Street movement is criticized because it doesn't have an agenda. I think most social movements. I think most social movements start with people standing up or sitting down and saying this is wrong, and then we got to figure out what it is that we're going to do.
Right.
But the Millionaires Tax in particular is probably, with all due respect to the people who want to deal with Glass-Steagall, that the Millionaires Tax is probably as close to a unifying theme among Occupy Wall Street as there is. I mean, I don't know if you agree with that or you don't agree with that.
You mean the New York the actual Occupy?
Well, the New York
branch.
And if you look at polls which say, polling, there's a striking degree. As somebody who grew up in the 1960s, when in the beginning
the 1960s you grew up.
Yes, the 1960s or the 1860s, whatever it is. That there was that the level of, as measured in polls, which are kind of a diffuse and generalized measurement, that the sense of support for whatever is motivating the Occupy Wall Street movement is striking.
Well, you talked about, again, you bring it back to the Millionaires Tax, and
I thought that was pretty clever. But
we were talking at the beginning about the Post's using the Reed Andrews Lips his quote on taxes. There's another one that we've used the same headline, but there's another quote of his that we've used, which is a little bit longer, and he's compared his stance on this to his father Mario Cuomo's stance on the death penalty, and the death penalty was very, very popular in New York State, but Mario Cuomo said he was morally opposed.
And I think the Post supported Mario on that, didn't they? No, I'm sorry.
Exactly, but.
Yeah, but he also get enough legislators and you can override my veto.
But the point I was saying is that Andrew Cuomo was in a sense comparing his moral opposition to going against his word on increasing the Millionaires Tax, or letting it not expire, I guess is the way of putting it, to his father as a strong moral position. And
the moral position is not on the tax. The moral position is on giving his word. In other words, I don't know that it's a moral question as to whether or not you
I don't know. You
whether or not
compare
you're allowed-
death penalty to
Well,
taxes as
well,
moral
But, no, but I mean,
Well,
but I think what you're saying is
those
that,
are the only sure things.
That may be right. That may be right. Touche. You win.
there's a good line.
You're not repeating him saying "I am the state," though, right?
Oh, I am government. No, I am government.
I think it was Ich
I
bin
am
ein
the
State. I think it was
But should revenue be part of the solution on its state level? We have this huge gap.
On any government level.
On any government level.
You start first with
but-
cutting waste,
yeah, you
fraud,
see,
and abuse. Throwing more money at it isn't. Once you give money to
depends-
bureaucracy, it's going to be spent,
And
and it's
it-
not going to be spent efficiently.
and it's going to depend on the circumstance. Not in the context of New York. I know Republicans. I know a lot of conservatives who say at the national level. The problem isn't revenue; it's spending. But that is really true here in New York. We are almost, in a sense, almost maxed out in terms of our level of taxes. I mean, it's a real structural problem, and I think in terms of competitiveness, to make this state friendly for businesses, to bring businesses here to start job creation, I don't think we can talk about raising taxes.
Well, let's unwind that for a bit and see where you get most of your services from. Who provides you with police protection? New York State? The federal government? Who provides you with fire services?
Local
New York State?
municipalities.
New York? Well, that's exactly my point. If you wanted to rephrase the Willie Sutton argument, you're looking to the city to provide the basic services of your daily life. Where is the city going to get that money from? To pick up your garbage, to put out your
By
fires, to
attracting
fight.
new businesses and people
Well,
to come here and live.
And
and
that's
work.
going to create money tomorrow.
First of all, the city, the city's ability on raising taxes is very narrow. The only thing they can do is the property tax.
Right.
That brings us back to the state issue, not the city.
But if you're looking to the city to deliver services, you have to look to see where the city can get its money from.
And in fact,
Well,
the city,
the other problem that the city and this I'm sure we could devote a whole other show to is the increase in pension costs. It used to be pension spending for New York City was about 1.8 to 1.9 billion as of 2001. 10 years later, it's now more like 9 to 10 billion. That's a cost that is eating up the rest of the city budget, which is another reason why pension reform has to be a part of it. Has to be a part. As I said,
argument.
That's right.
You're right. It's
Much
another
larger
show.
It's a whole night, not an hour.
Yes, ma'am. Tell us your name and your campus.
To the entire panel. How do you think that the city has handled the protesters, and what do you think the protester will accept as a proper solution?
What the protesters will accept as the proper solution. I mean, I have to give the mayor credit for being
overly patient.
well. No, he was. Well, he should be overly.
Well,
patient.
I thought he
think
was overly patient.
I think he
in
should,
terms
but
of
I mean,
how long
but I
they
think that
let them stay there.
That I think the mayor understands that when the First Amendment says you have the right to protest to seek redress for your grievances against the government, those are pretty powerful words.
The mayor can't choose which parts of the First Amendment he wants to uphold. And Robert, Bob, you, all three of us have written for or do write for newspapers. And the way the city police treated the members of the press in that fiasco a week or so ago is just unacceptable. So to say that the mayor was supporting the First Amendment right to protest and then ignore the fact that he was in abject violation of free press aspects of the First Amendment.
I agree with that. I mean, I
he's
agree
being
with that.
very
But
short-sighted.
but I also, and this,
But the point
this
is,
is also a bias, is that I mean, I would rather have our cops. You could point to any individual abuse that happened, but our cops are both more tolerant and more able to handle kind of craziness. I mean, we don't have what happened out at UC Davis with people, spraying pepper spray. We don't have what happened in Oakland. We don't have what happened in Seattle. So, I mean, I happen to think that our cops are
They're the
least
best. They're the
heavy-handed.
best- they're the
Are
best
least
trained
heavy-handed,
force in the United
as they ought to be when you're dealing with political protest. And, you know, so, I mean...
you have an anchor on Fox saying, what's wrong with pepper spray? After all, pepper is a food.
Yes, I am a great defender of Fox, as you know.
If
somebody
if
takes
there's
that
going to be an
clip,
assault,
I'm
it
in
may as well
trouble.
be with pepper.
Okay.
So, how should the city handle?
I thought that they were overly patient. I think they handled it well. I think that you have a right of free speech in the First Amendment, but it doesn't give you the right to set up an encampment like they did in that park there. And also, let's talk. And
But civil disobedience is not designed to do what you have you have a right to civil disobedience. Right. The fact that you don't have a right to occupy that park, that's also part of civil disobedience.
As a member of society, you have to abide by certain laws, rules, and regulations. There was a lot of stuff going on.
You have to be willing to abide by the consequences of your actions.
Yeah, no, which is
you
what
don't always.
which is what
the whole
Reggie said.
history,
No, that's exactly
the whole
right.
history of social movement in this country is not necessarily complying with the law, but it's about But I mean, part of civil disobedience means accepting the fact that you have to you might have to pay for the consequences of your actions.
As the Democratic judge said after the occupation was cleared out, said there is a right to protest, but that right does not extend to indefinite sleepovers. Basically.
Why is he a Democratic judge?
Well,
He's just a
well,
judge.
Well, no, I'm just
a judge.
No, but I'm just making the
First of all,
point.
there are not many Republican judges.
If he could
That must
have
happen.
his way.
We're working on that.
Well, how many times have they
been
said,
criticized?
"Oh well, yes, the Robert Supreme Court determined and took away all of our rights," blah blah blah. I'm just making that.
Just don't forget, the media, as we all know, is comprised by and large of individuals who are more sympathetic with the Democratic Party's principles and ideals. I think
Yes, the liberal media.
The liberal
Here we
media.
go. All right.
Except for
There we
Fox
go.
News.
Right. Except for Fox News, which is fair
And
and
the New York
balanced.
Post.
Which is fair and
Start
balanced.
my day every day with the New York
Yes, sir.
My name is Anthony Munoz. I go to Queens College. And my question was, with a large portion of taxes already supplied by wealthy individuals, doesn't taxing them more leave incentive for government to help them out rather than lesser people?
And that's the philosophical question. In terms of addressing the ills and the challenges society faces, are those challenges going to be being cured and addressed by individual initiative, by people who create wealth, as opposed to a government that distributes other people's money? That's what it comes down to. I mean, this whole concept of taxing the wealthy people, those are the individuals who are the drivers of our economic engine. They're the entrepreneurs. They're the people who start small businesses and create new jobs. I mean, this whole thing about taxing people who are making $250,000 a year, they're small business owners. Okay, they're not the 1%. And it's those people, and the vast majority of jobs in this city are created by small businesses. And those are the very people who are going to be getting hurt the most by an increase in taxes.
Well, I would argue and say that, again, not all millionaires are the ones that are creating jobs. I think that we have a large component in our state of middle-income families and those that are entrepreneurs already. In the state of New York, one of our largest economic generators in the state is agriculture. Our farm workers are not millionaires in the state, but they are hardworking individuals, many of them from immigrant families, and they really deserve their fair share. What many of us have said, again, in my house, is that this is about a fair share. We recognize, and I will admit, that we have a very disproportionate tax system in our state. So we have millionaires and we have poor families that are paying the same percentage in income in taxes, and I believe that is wrong and that needs to change. But on the onset of current topics, we're saying that everyone needs to put in their fair share, and it's not fair that millionaires are paying less and others are paying more, and they're getting the benefit of most of the services when many of us are not.
But if you look nationally, and I'm sure Mr. George will have the percentages, it's almost 50% of Americans don't pay any tax at all. Yeah. And if you look at the top
47.
And if you look,
they don't pay any income.
Don't
pay any income.
They don't pay income tax.
Because they don't earn enough money.
Well, but you have the 1%.
I'm
top
sure
1%.
every one of them would love to have to pay taxes.
Well, that's what America's all about, is picking yourself up by the bootstraps, and that's why people come to this country. But the top 1%, they pay what percentage of the overall taxes? Was it 30, 37% of taxes are paid by The very top 1%.
That's in numbers of people. Yeah, you're right. And numbers of returns filed.
So they're paying their fair share. And to keep on going back, look, I mean, that's what was happening, for example, in Greece. What the onerous taxation system there, look what happened to that country. That country is bankrupt. And if it doesn't fail in a month or 2 months or 6 months, it's going to fail.
It wasn't only because of taxes.
Well, it was government spending, and
also-
there's this whole pension system there, and the underground
And it's
economy.
also
I mean,
and it's also a euro system that tries to combine currencies but doesn't combine.
Yeah, there are whole,
political
And
will.
also,
There's also a much
there's
larger.
much more complicated.
That's another show, exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
And I'm from John Joyce College. My question is, as a graduating student, I would like to know what jobs are there for us and is there any hope?
there's always hope.
There has to be hope.
There has to be hope. Without hope,
And
But
also faith and charity.
well,
I mean, where are the growth job sectors, and to what
service
degree?
industry, hospitality.
and to what degree? I mean, traditionally we have an economy that's based on finance, insurance, real estate. That's the big
the traits.
That's the
And
big
tourism in New York.
and tourism.
Tourism.
So I would, obviously real estate is kind of in the dumper. It's making some comeback. Finance,
Healthcare. There's a shortage
and-
of doctors in this country, a big shortage of doctors in this country.
And I think
dentists
also
even more so.
green technology
too many
is on
lawyers,
the rise.
so.
But that will take a little bit of time.
technology.
Green technology.
Technology,
Which is what the mayor is talking
Well,
about.
technology
Right.
in general. I mean, if you can, master, any aspect of tech, you're definitely in a you're in a better position.
If you can
And the
master
whole idea,
mathematics, you're in a better position.
and the whole idea of what the mayor is talking about of investing $100 million and drawing these new tech campuses here
Right.
is not only for those campuses, but because of the multiplier effect.
That's
of
right.
That, of that investment.
do two
And-
campuses now,
and-
right? Originally it was
right.
gonna be
And
one, but now they wanna
hopefully,
do two.
any whether it's public investment or even private investment, the argument of why that's good for a city is because not only does it affect those that are directly involved, but it has this multiplier effect of people who serve those. So I mean, it's
Well, it's
a
I think
rising
there's the
tide.
same multiplier
A rising
as the
tide
same multiplier
lifts
effect
all-
that affects Wall Street.
lifts all
That's
ships.
a 7-to-1. I think as a city, we haven't leveraged our strong universities to the extent that other major cities have.
Agreed.
Boston, Philadelphia,
Yep.
all take advantage of the concentration of educated graduates of top-flight educational institutions, but we don't do that well enough in New York City.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, my name is Tabitha, and I'm from Brooklyn College. This question is
An excellent college.
We like
Yes.
that,
Yes,
right?
we
Hey,
like it.
Brooklyn.
As a Brooklyn College graduate.
this question is actually because of Robert George's statement about.
We're not responsible for Robert George's statement.
I'm not responsible for my own statements. No.
Okay, but it was regarding businesses being able to hire more workers at minimum wage. And so I'm asking if workers cannot afford the necessities that contribute to a quality life, like health care, child care, transportation costs, food, housing, are businesses really able to produce more by having more workers at minimum wage? Are things like low morale, high turnover, or even the ability to stay focused considered?
Just say the last part again. I'm sorry.
Are things like low morale, high turnover, or even the ability to stay focused considered? And anybody can really answer it.
I mean, I think those are. I mean, I think if you're a business and you're trying to create a competitive environment, I think you'll certainly will factor into a number of things to fill out your workforce, and those kind of extra social benefits and so forth will certainly factor into it. But you do have a bottom line in terms of trying to balance how many people you're able to hire at a certain wage.
And also, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, one of the good points that she's making is that it's this question of quantity versus quality. So if you have 50 workers that are making minimum wage, what is the morale of those workers? Do they really want to come to work every day? Do they care about serving customers and the public? Versus the 35 workers who are essentially making a living wage. They're at a higher salary. Is there less turnover? I believe if I was a small business, to which I'm not, but this is about quality. This is about people that are hardworking, that really appreciate the fact that they're employed, that want to come to work every day, and truly are feeling like they can live off of their salary and not, be on public
I just
assistance.
want to try to get one more. And in fact, the person who's making the minimum wage likely needs a great degree of public support for health care and a lot of other things which would be covered under a living wage. And in essence, the general public is subsidizing that employer who is paying a minimum wage because of all the services that that minimum wage will not cover. Pardon my politics. Yes. Very quickly. We only have a couple of minutes left.
Good evening. My name is Freddie Belliard from John Jay College, and my question is open to the entire panel. Can you assess the impact of the current economic crisis on the 2012 presidential election?
That's what the election is all about.
In 1 minute.
What did Bill Clinton say? It's the economy, stupid. This time around, it's jobs. I mean, that is the number one issue that is going to determine this election. It's not so much going to determine who the Republican nominee is, but whoever that person is going to be. And with respect to President Obama, who's going to present a vision for the future of this country that is going to show how we're going to get back on our feet economically and create the jobs. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, it's exactly right. I mean, it's a very, very tough political climate, certainly for the president. I mean, even under the best of circumstances, he's going to be facing something like a 8.5, 8.6 at best unemployment rate, which, historically speaking, no president has been reelected in that in that framework. But as Dan said, the Republicans, when they nominate their standard bearer, they need to create a vision as to what it's going to what they're going to offer the country instead.
Just one quick
That's
point.
really,
Wait, let me.
you hit it on it. There really has to be an alternative. People aren't necessarily just going to vote against Obama because the unemployment rate may be 8.6 or 8.7.
I want to give you very quickly.
One quick point, though, about that is that the president would already see what his re-election strategy is going to be, because he can't run on the theme, are you better off now than you were 4 years ago, because the resounding answer is no.
But
he's going to try to demonize Republicans. That's going to be how he tries to get back in.
That was good.
I just got the 30-second warning, so now I'm going to have to. I believe that one of the aces in the holes for the Democrats is, in fact, the Republican nomination process, which has been
It's like making sausage.
which
It's
has
ugly, but
been a bit of a circus. I want to thank everybody for this. I think this is a very spirited discussion. I think that this is something that's going to be that if in fact Occupy Wall Street has woken up, whether it's the left or it's a broader group than just the left, to kind of engage in kind of an economic debate about the future, then debate is a good thing. I was a reporter for many years. I think debate
makes America great.
Debate is a very good thing. I want to thank everybody, and we'll see you next time on CUNY Forum. Thank you.
All right.